Syeed Gibbs, a transfer corner from Georgia Tech, is officially a Jayhawk as Lance Leipold is working the transfer portal hard. Many more possibly to come.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're giving a little KU football transfer portal update. KU makes an addition of Syeed Gibbs, a transfer corner from Georgia Tech. We'll get into his game, what he brings to the table, and what else is cooking for Lance Leipold in the portal game right now with things being opened up. We'll also talk a little NFL draft opportunities for the KU players. Round one came and went. No KU players went, as was expected. But now you could start seeing some guys going off the board maybe as early as round 2 or round 3, and especially on day 3 of the NFL draft. So cool opportunity there for KU football. Getting into all that on today's episode, which we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins with FanDuel. Okay, so Syeed Gibbs is officially a Jayhawk. He is a corner transfer, began his career at Rhode Island. He's a 6', 190-pound corner, originally from Everett, Massachusetts, and he goes to Rhode Island, which is at the FCS level. He came in as a unranked, unrated, whatever you want to call it. I guess some people refer to it as a 0-star recruit out of high school. That's not really what it is. It's just that he was unrated, but shows you he was, under the radar, so to speak. So he goes to Rhode Island, and I think he was a FCS freshman All-American. So Kansas is just, racking up they're cornering the market in former FCS freshman All-Americans. Then in year 2 at Rhode Island, he has a really good season. He has 38 tackles. He has 3 pass deflections. He has 3 interceptions for the Rams. He has a Pro Football Focus grade in his second and final season at Rhode Island of 69.9. And he was actually I should mention, he redshirted in his first year at Rhode Island because he played limited games enough. He had 2 tackles, but ended up redshirting. So he gets the FCS freshman All-American team as a redshirt freshman in 2023 when he played 577 snaps, and he had a 70 PFF grade and a 72 coverage grade. He was really good for Rhode Island. So he transfers up, makes the big jump to Georgia Tech, where this past season he ends up with 22 tackles, 1 pass deflection, 1 sack, and 2 forced fumbles as a redshirt sophomore. PFF grades below average here, 54.1 overall in 343 snaps. He had a 60 grade in run defense, so he's not the biggest corner in the world. 6 foot though, decent size for a corner, but he's able to be an adequate enough run defender. And he had just a 50.6 coverage grade. So that's obviously, you'd like to see that number go up a little bit more. But I almost look at it as like, okay, his first year at Rhode Island, he had a redshirt to get adjusted to playing at the collegiate level of ball. And then his next year at that level of play with Rhode Island, he ends up being an FCS freshman All-American. Okay, now he takes a big jump to Power 4 football with Georgia Tech. Probably a big adjustment period for him. And I think it's safe to assume, especially if you just look at that pattern of year 2 for him at Rhode Island was a lot better. I think year 2 of Power 4 football here at Kansas this year, I think it's safe to assume that he will be better than he was last year at Georgia Tech. Overall, you look at the coverage numbers, though, and you see the coverage grade of 50.6. And honestly, you look at some of the targets allowed and stuff, and it doesn't necessarily show a guy who, like, sometimes you see guys who have a coverage grade of 50.6, and you can see it in the stats. It's like, oh, they're getting burnt. They're giving up, 15 yards per catch. They're giving up a ton of touchdowns. The completion percentage against is really high, stuff like that. It wasn't that bad for him. I mean, so Rhode Island, his final year, he was targeted 51 times. He gave up 12.5 yards per reception, but he only gave up a little over 7 yards per target. He gave up 1 touchdown compared to 3 interceptions with 3 pass breakups and had a 63.8 NFL passer rating against, which are all very good. At Georgia Tech this year, he was targeted 36 times. He gave up 22 catches, about a 61% completion rate, a little higher than you'd like, but it's not like a huge number. He gave up 9.6 yards per catch, and He gave up a little under 7 yards per target, which is not that bad at all. He gave up just one touchdown. He didn't have any interceptions, but just one touchdown. 86.7 NFL passer rating again. So, like, those numbers, yeah, they're not all-American or something, but, like, those don't equate out to being a 50 coverage grade. Now, the coverage grade isn't just looking at the numbers, it's looking at every snap and all that sort of thing. But I do think that I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think he's a better coverage guy than the 50.6 that was kind of indicated there. And again, going back to the patterns of what he did at the FCS level, I wouldn't be surprised if in year two here for Georgia Tech, he ends up being a guy who, and he's playing significant snaps, right, for a team that goes to a bowl game. Played a lot of them for his team in the slot this year, Georgia Tech, which is interesting because he was mostly on the outside the year before at Rhode Island, which one, that could be at Rhode Island, it's easier to play a guy on the outside once you get to Power 4 level, like the size goes up and stuff. But of his snaps that he played at 343 at Georgia Tech, 261 of those came in the slot. The year prior at Rhode Island, 577 snaps, 518 of those came as an outside corner. And so, again, does that mean he's going to be a slot corner for KU? Well, if you view him, because if you look at the corner room, DJ Graham, Jalen Todd could be the possible starters. That would leave your third corner as more of a slot corner in theory. So that would work out perfectly anyway. But I know KU in the same way they like offensive linemen who can play multiple positions. They probably like corners in the same way they can play multiple positions. I'm sure they like guys that make their lives easier if they can play multiple positions and you can do multiple things with them. And so you do have a little bit of that here with Syeed Gibbs, plus the fact that he's just going to be a redshirt junior in the fall of 2025 means that you could have 2 years left with him. And you look at that corner room, well, DJ Graham would be graduating at the end of 2025 as a redshirt senior. So, like, if Gibbs has a good enough season as your third or fourth corner, then he could be a starter the following season. And it gives you just a little bit more time for guys like Jaleel Hurley, who's a redshirt sophomore, for guys like Jameel Croft, redshirt sophomore, Jacoby Davis, redshirt sophomore, Austin Alexander and Andre Gibson is redshirt freshman, Chris McCorkle, who's an incoming true freshman. It gives you more time for those players to continue to develop and get better and hone their craft. That now you don't have to throw them into the fire if they're not ready. Now, if they get thrown into the fire, it's because they earned it over another veteran that you kind of brought in here. So I like this move all around for KU. Adds another corner, adds another DB to the room. They now have 9 scholarship corners on the roster. And when you look at it, obviously, so I have Kansas at over like 80 scholarship players at this point, which, again, the walk-ons are going away, or at least we think. I mean, that stuff isn't being signed off on, and we'll see where things end up there. But if you're going to be allowed 105 scholarship players, it's not really a worry for KU. Now, it does become a bit of something where it's like, does it make more sense for KU to be sticking 80 to 85 scholarships as opposed to the 105 so that they can, condense? Like, if you're not having to pay 20 extra players NIL, even if it's the last 20 on your roster, that money adds up that you can divvy that out for a better top 85. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some schools start to do that, right? Like, you'll see the smaller schools, quote unquote, the non-blue bloods of college football of the world be like, you know what, we're going to try to play with a 75 scholarship roster because we'll be able to pay our 75 the same amount of money that Alabama's paying their 105 or something, and it'll allow us to compete at a better level. So I don't know. Anyway, that was just a quick side there, but wouldn't surprise me if this is it for them looking at corners. I still think that they could be looking for players on the offensive and defensive line. So let's get to that next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. And today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by the Amazon 4K Fire TV Stick. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Affordable and portable gaming. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with than lugging around that gigantic Xbox or, all the cords that you have to bring with you, right? Hey, easier than having to bring a lot of games and discs with you. And so it just makes things a lot easier. I actually hooked mine up the other day. I had a Fire TV stick, but I hadn't hooked up the Xbox thing. I did the other day, and it was awesome I actually played a game of college football in there. It was a lot of fun. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, second gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, first and second gen, and Fire TV Cube, the third gen. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football your second listen every day. All right, other portal news for KU. Obviously, you land a corner here. You feel like you're pretty good now at that corner position. I think the focus really hones in on the line of scrimmage. And KU obviously already adding a defensive end. Probably could bring in another defensive end, but I think that the main focus is offensive line. They could bring in multiple offensive linemen, but I think there is a real priority. Like if you're divvying out your NIL money, I think the majority of it goes to bringing on a good offensive lineman. But again, you could bring in another good defensive end too. So some latest news with players around both of those things. We talked about Leroy Harris III committing to KU, the transfer from Chattanooga. Thank you to the Everydayers if you already caught that one. If you haven't, check out that deep dive on him coming into Kansas. They had Cam Williams visit on, I guess, Thursday. Who's a transfer from Georgia State. He would fill that other possible defensive end role if they could add him. He's a good defensive end, somebody that you would project to be one of the top 3 or 4 defensive ends on this Kansas team if they could land him. And we'll see how that visit went, and if it's enough for them to get a commitment. I think he has some other visits lined up too. This one came from Bryce Kuhn of 24/7 Sports on Twitter. It was former South Alabama offensive tackle Jordan Davis has heard from, and it had a bunch of schools on there, and one of the schools was Kansas. And so Jordan Davis would become certainly a very interesting offensive tackle option for KU. And I think you look at it right now, we went into spring ball for that KU offensive line feeling good about, okay, Bryce Foster, who, I don't know if he just didn't participate in spring ball at all, or if it was just like more limited in, some practices he did, some practices he didn't, because obviously he's doing track and field, and he just wrapped up like a really good, or I think they're still doing it, but like he is having a good track and field season. So that, it impacts things a little bit. But you came in with that, you felt good that Calvin Clements would nail down one of the other tackle spots, and then you felt good that Cobee Baines would nail down one of the guard spots for you, right? But the question was who's going to be the other tackle and who's going to be the other guard. And there's some players for KU that are kind of versatile and can play around at different positions, possibly like Nolan Gorchika. He could play guard or tackle, like whatever you would kind of need him to be, that give you options on what you want to do there. But I do think it's interesting when you look at the common names that have come up. It seems like tackle is more of a priority right now, and I think that makes sense. Allocation resources and stuff like that. Like the tackle position is on an island more than the guard position is. And knowing you have Bryce Foster at center to come over and help that guard potentially, or, it's easier for the running back to get that pressure coming through the middle than maybe that speed rusher on the outside, to where, I don't know, I guess it makes more sense to put more money. Like it just, you're just talking about the most important position on the field. Tackle, there's a reason like tackles get drafted higher or get paid more often than guards necessarily, right? So it makes sense that you would be going for this a little bit more. Plus, then, if you have guys that can play multiple positions, like if Tavaki Tuikavalotu or Nolan Gorchika can play guard or tackle, and then you bring in a good tackle, then just those two guys become in competition for guard, right? And that kind of helps out the KU depth, that you'd also have guys where one of them would be coming off the bench and could play either and be a swing player for you. So Davis specifically, he's logged over 1,400 snaps at South Alabama. He's got basically a career PFF grade of around 58, but the pass block grade this past season really good, almost a 76 pass block grade. Run blocking game, not as good, but I also think you do have to like take into account some of these, because some of the like blocking grades that you see on these guys, I think a lot of them would actually, I know it's counterintuitive to be like, oh, you'd be jumping up a level in competition, your grades are going to get better. But I do think offensive line is such a position that is, like the coaching matters a ton, the scheme matters a ton, the play calling matters a ton, and how you protect your offensive linemen, right? I mean, if you have smaller offensive linemen who are like quicker athletes, doesn't make sense to just hang in there all the time and run straight up the gut on the other team. No, you want to move the pocket. You want to get the linemen out running on screens or downfield on runs or option plays, right? Kansas does a good job of doing those things, and it makes linemen, I think, play better to their skill set and look better when you do those things, right? I mean, it's obvious. Like, that's the thing with coaching. Good coaches are going to make players look even better because they're going to be able to take advantage of their skill sets. So even though it would be a jump in competition, I look at it and say, okay, he's a good pass blocker, and could you take advantage more of some of his, get rid of some of his weaknesses in run blocking or something? The other guy was Makilan Thomas. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it. He's an Arkansas State transfer who was visiting Virginia, and according to Greg Madia, he is somebody who Kansas has interest in. He was a former All-Sun Belt second-team selection, somebody who's logged almost 2,400 snaps over 4 years at Arkansas State, and this past season had a 73 PFF grade. Year before that, 70. Pass block grade the last 2 years, 77 and 86. So that's somebody who's probably going to have stern competition for, but he would certainly be a big-time ad if Lance Leipold and company could reel him in. Let's finish up NFL Draft Day for Devin Neal, Cobee Bryant, and many other Jayhawks. Could they get picked? Where could they get picked? And what does it all mean for KU football's program? Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel's giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You might have bet on some first-round draft picks. You might be betting on the NBA playoffs or the NHL playoffs. You can get who's going to score the first basket, who's going to score the first goal, and you can even parlay those together if you want. You also got Zurich going on for golf with like team golf outings. Plenty to still bet on, even though it's not football season, although the draft is going on. Don't miss out at FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets today with FanDuel. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to make it your first listen every day. And thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. You can find Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. All right, so NFL draft for KU. No players go in the first round. Not that that was expected necessarily. But there's some guys that could be going on day 2. And especially going to be some guys, if they don't go on day 2, they could be going on day 3. So Devin Neal, there was NFL mock draft consensus. There's a site that looks at all the mock drafts and kind of puts a consensus. Devin Neal, 119 there. So that kind of puts him in the range of being like a 3rd to 4th round pick. Logan Brown at 148, that puts him in the range of like 4th to 5th round pick. Cobee Bryant at 149, same thing there. Mello Dotson at 225, that kind of puts him into the range of 6th to 7th round draft pick. And then Bryce Cable do 237, kind of same thing, 6th to 7th, if not undrafted there. Undrafted range, but still ranked on there as well. Quentin Skinner, Michael Ford, and LJ Arnold. And what I find interesting here is the amount of players KU could have drafted. One is a little weird coming off a year in which you went 5-7 and didn't even make a bowl game, but it also shows the progression of this program and the talent that they are really producing, that they are developing, that they're putting out there. So you can go back and find years like 1957 and 1962 and so forth that have Kansas getting like more than a handful of players picked in the draft. But a lot of those in the early draft were like drafts where like you're going to see like, oh, this guy was taken in the 11th round. This guy was taken in the 20th round. But if we're looking at times where Kansas had, because if you look at it, Devin Neal should get drafted. Logan Brown should get drafted. Cobee Bryant should get drafted. Those are 3 guys I feel confident will get drafted at some point. And in the case of Neal, Brown, and Bryant, I don't think it would shock me if any of them went in the 3rd round necessarily, right? So that's 3 guys. Can you get a 4th between one of Mello or Bryce Cable do? I think you can. It'll be close, and maybe even you could get a 5th if all of them go. But I do feel really good about at least those first 3. And honestly, I kind of do think Mello Dotson could get drafted. But if we look back to times that KU has had 4 players selected in the first 7 rounds of the NFL draft, it's not a long list. 1969, and that was the year after. That was the draft after they lost in the Orange Bowl to Penn State on the 12th man. But you had Bobby Douglas, Vernon Vanoy, John Zook, Keith Christensen. You did it in 1974. That was after they made the Liberty Bowl. Don Goody, who was a first-round pick. Delvin Williams, Mitch Sutton, and then David James, your quarterback. 1976, you did it, which was after a Sun Bowl appearance. Kirk Knopf, Eddie Lewis, Dave Scott, and Steve Taylor. Then 1986, you went 6-6 that year, so that one would be closer to this one. You had Alvin Walton, Lynn Williams, Mike Norseth, and Johnny Holloway. And then 1995, this one makes sense. It was coming off that 10-win Aloha Bowl season, which you had Dorian Brew, Rod Jones, Chris Banks, and LT Levine. And then obviously the Orange Bowl season. 2008 draft, Aqib Talib in the first, Anthony Collins, Derek Fine, Marcus Henry also get drafted. There actually are some times where they've had more draft picks than that, though. If you look back to, because again, if Kansas can get those three with Neal, Brown, and Bryant, and then you get those two of Dotson and Cable, that would give them 5. You have to go back to 1975, which oddly was coming off a 4-7 season, similar to this one. And you had 5 players drafted: Emmett Edwards, Bruce Adams, Robert Miller, Steve Toll, and Mike Lemon. And honestly, what's crazy, like this is just a quick aside, because you might have heard me say 1974, 1975, and 1976 were part of these 4 5-man classes. That means that 1974 team that went 7-4-1 and lost in the Liberty Bowl, they had 9 players that would get drafted in the next 2 drafts, and they had 13 players that would get drafted in the next 3. And it's like, how did they even lose 4 games? How did they go 7-4-1, which is like a fine record, but it's not something that like jumps off the page. The reason for that, when you go look at the teams they played on their schedule, Oklahoma, who was 10-0-1 that year, finished ranked 3rd. Nebraska finished ranked 7th. Missouri finished 17th, although Kansas beat them and finished ranked 18th. So that makes sense. Although it makes it even wackier, Kansas lost to Tennessee, who finished ranked 19th, one spot behind all them. But anyway, if we went the Holy Grail, by the way, I don't think Kansas is going to be able to do this year, but maybe in a future year with the way Lance Leipold has gotten things rolling at KU football. 6 players drafted in the first 7 rounds. Again, it has happened one time, 1977. So right after that run of all those guys drafted that I just mentioned. Mike Butler, who went in the top 10 of the draft, Nolan Cromwell in the 2nd round, Terry Beeson in the 2nd, Laverne Smith in the 4th, Skip Sharp in the 5th, and then Chris Golub in the 7th. But anyway, history lesson over. Hopefully a fun couple of days for Jayhawks in the NFL draft. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time if there's any breaking news over the weekend. If not, catch you back on Monday. Probably more transfer portal talk for either KU football or KU basketball. See you then on LOJ.